Go ahead and start. Abhishek, will you be sharing the deck?
Yeah,
Mm.
give me a second. Let me know once you can see the screen.
Yeah. So we're excited to present to you today's webinar. We'll be featuring Steven Melito. He's the Director of Solutions and Engineering at Telnex, and he'll be joined alongside with James Whedbee. He's our VP of Engineering. And then me, along with Abhishek, will be moderating the panel, which will be followed by a live product build and then a Ask Me Anything section where you can ask anything you want of Steven or James related to building voice AI agents. Next slide, please. So real quickly, we just wanted to overview some of the production use cases. These are some of the most common ones we're seeing, and these are moving away from MVPs or pilot implementations to actual real-world deployment in production settings. So sales automation, both inbound as well as outbound, customer support. So voice AI agents are able to provide support in hundreds of different languages all at once. Telnex supports almost a little over more than 100 languages. Healthcare, so across the healthcare value chain, we're seeing voice AIs being implemented. And finally, operations as well. Next slide. Telnex, our real strength, I mean, there's a lot of voice AI solutions on the market. Our real strength is that we have full stack ownership from the telephony, the LLM, including the STTs, the TTS. And so this minimizes the hops that users experience. So there's very, very low latency, and there's a great customer experience in terms of interacting with your voice AI agent. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Abhishek, to handle the rest of the slides.
All right. So we have been building the whole telephony stack, and since the past few months, what we have been doing is we have been doubling down on the whole cascaded architecture that you would need for building and deploying a voice AI architecture. So right now, what you could do with Telnyx is you could use you could use our STT API as a standalone API for building our STT based applications. You could use our inference, that is our GPUs hosted and points of presence hosted, Quen and all the LLM models, and use it for rest of your use cases beyond voice AI. Same with TTS and telephony. So what we have done is we have unified the stack, and then we have also self-hosted pretty much the entire stack in our own GPUs and 19 different points of presence, and um, to make it more compliant and more than compliant, to make sure that we can control three things. Number one, what we the agenda here was we wanted to control the latency. So when you are actually using a inference or a TTS model that is hosted in a third-party vendor's the servers, then they typically use a public cloud network. With that, that brings a lot of latency and jitter. And because we host it in our own private servers and our private network, we can control the latency and cut it down by at least 60 milliseconds or 80 milliseconds for each section, and that helps us control the latency. And secondly, if you would have gotten on call with any customer support from any other voice AI vendors out there, you might have noticed them shifting the blame towards either the STT provider or some LLM model or some TDS model or a third party telephony, stating that okay, some certain feature or a certain agent is not working because a certain part of the borrowed stack is broken. And we wanted to avoid that because we know how important and serious businesses are being built on top of voice AI. So now what, because we host all four parts of the cascaded architecture, we can control what breaks and how to fix it, rather than shifting the blame on any third party vendor. And lastly, having a whole stack ownership lets us also control the pricing of it, so that we can charge a fair amount and not increase the charges overnight just because one of our vendors is has decided to increase the price. So this also helps you predict your business better and also predict your profit margins and your whole financial know-how accordingly. And after deploying at least hundreds of thousands of voice agents across our platforms, what we did is we dipped into our latency metrics or pricing to see what exactly where exactly do we stand. So our average latency, the end-to-end round trip latency, is 569 milliseconds. Where if you look at any other platform, you'll see them claiming about 500 milliseconds, but then that's time to first token, or it's just a first it's just a fragment of what actually should be measured. So that's why what we measure is a round trip latency. That is the time it takes for the cascaded architecture to begin, finish it, and then your output to come back. So that is 569 milliseconds. All of this happens because of the reasons I told you a while back. And our cost is 5 cents per minute. That is covering most of the STT, LLM cost, and as well as TTS cost. Whereas if you look at any vendor, that'll cost you around 18 cents per minute. And that is excluding the cost of telephony that they typically charge on top of it. And we have around 1,300 voices right now in our portal. And this is all accessible via API as well as just on our platform. And the way to and the way we add voices is typically, rather than just running and adding any kind of voice that comes out, we evaluate it based on some production grade workflows to see if this voice is actually going to add value to our end customers. And this way, what we do is we make sure that every voice that's there on the platform is handpicked for maximum efficiency and um, actual use cases. So this way, we are fast, we are cheap, and we are mindful of the kind of voices we are providing. That doesn't mean that if you want a new voice that you would really love your business to have, we wouldn't be considering to adding it. Of course, we listen to our customers. That's why we are here, and that's how we have been here for a while now. And yeah, this is a little bit of intro about Telnex and what we do, where do we stand, what's our strategy, and what's our typical pricing. Now let's look at what does it look like to build with Telnex. So for this, we'll go about doing this in two ways. So firstly, what you need to do to get started is make sure you have a Telnex local MCP server. So you can find it in the documentation, and we'll also be sending out these links after the call. You need to go here, make sure that you're getting your Telnex API key, and you have set up your MCP in your cloud, uh, your codecs, or your coding tool of choice. That's one way of doing it. And the other way is you can simply just go to our portal and sign up there and just have a nice GUI to build your application. So for the sake of this demo, I wanted to show you guys two things. Number one, I wanted to show what is possible just by using STT and TTS endpoints. And number two, I wanted to show you what's possible by connecting your Telnyx MCP with your Cloud Code so that it can build all these kinds of assistants for you right from your terminal. So first thing that we are going to do is this is my terminal. Can you see my terminal? Let's see.
Yes, Abhishek, maybe also maximize your screen so they could see it better as well.
Okay. Now?
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. So I have my Cloud Code here. I'm just going to say I need a application, 10x assistant that will help my okay, forgive my grammar or my spellings. I actually built something to solve that. Let me show that to you next. Mm, Cool. While we are waiting for the assistant to while we wait for the assistant to reply back and bill its thing, what we are going to do is we look at something that I built with just using Telnyx STT endpoint. So I wanted to talk about Bolo. What is this? Is it's basically a alternative to Whisper Flow that I built on just using Telnex infra. So what it does is basically the moment I enter the right option key, I can speak something just the way Whisper Flow works, right? I enter the right option key and I speak something, and then that gets captured by the mic and then gets transcribed using Nova 3. And that's all happening via our STT API, and then an LLM, which is Quenchy, cleans it up and injects the text wherever my cursor is placed in. So in reality, this is how it looks like. Welcome to our webinar. I hope you really enjoy using Telnyx the way we enjoy building it. Oops. Okay, that's embarrassing. Hey, can you transcribe this for me? Okay, it's not working right now, just like any other demo, but this is what functionally it is supposed to be working as. And besides this, just with the TTS endpoint, you could build something like this mini app that I've created, which will help you transcribe anything that you need. So if I'm just talking about I can choose my model, I can choose a voice and generate a speech.
TTS endpoint API is cool.
So yeah, you could build something like this, and then we built a dedicated TTS library just based on our TTS endpoint. So we'll be sending this link as well. You can simply go here and play around with different voices just to see what voices are available in our platform, from what providers, what accents, what gender, and also listen to them to see what it sounds like.
Your room is ready. Enjoy your stay with us. Your room is ready.
Your claim has been approved and processed.
Now coming back to oh shit. The demo, because of some config I had in my Claude Code, I'm just using GStack. Okay, let's see. While we are doing this, let's see what happened with Bolo. So as you can see, what's happening here is it's looking at my Telnyx API key. It's looking at what the assistance endpoint looks like. Then it's coming up with it's using the Telnyx AI assistant skills. By the way, if you have not installed it yet, and if a lot of your work happens via the terminal, make sure you install the Telnex agent skills. These are the best practices, and these make sure that your agent can one shot through a couple of things. Testing 1 to 3. There you go. So my STT endpoint also ended up working. Hey, I am doing a demo of the STT endpoint. Now we are going to see if it's going to transcribe this accurately or not. All right, it worked. Now, coming back to this, let's see where we are with our project. Okay, it's creating a Telnex patient intake, And right now we are in setting up the config. The moment that is done, it will show up somewhere here in my assistants. While we are waiting for it, a quick demo of the platform in case you have not seen it yet. So the way to get started with building our assistant in the GUI is going to AI Suite, Assistants, and click on Create New Assistant if you want to start from scratch. If you're using Retail, Vapi, or any of the other alternatives, click on Import, choose your provider, let's say Retail, paste your API key here, and then you'll be able to load all the assistants that you have in Retail or Vapi or any platform that you choose. And if you're creating a new assistant, we already have some starter templates for you. You can go here, click on Continue. You can get started with testing your assistant right away. Choose all kinds of models that we have. In case you want to bring your own API key for OpenAI, you can do that as well. Then in the voices, these are the kind of voices we provide. We have voices from Telnyx Ultra, we Salesforce Square N3. Then we also have Minimax, Inworld, Rhyme, Resemble, XAI. We just launched this yesterday. So now we also support XAI voices. Meanwhile, let me just look here. Okay. All right, I think I have the assistant ready by my terminal. There you go. Hospital intake form. So I'll just go here and see what does it use. So if you look at it, the Cloud Code wrote the whole prompt. It added the Minimax voice that I wanted. The transcription model is set to Nova 3. Let's say English. Actually, yeah, let's just say Bucks. And we can just enable telephony. And let's test it out.
Thank you for calling City General Hospital. My name is Clara, and I'm here to help you complete your patient intake before your visit. This should only take a few minutes. May I start with your full name, please?
Hi, my name is Abhishek.
Hi, Abhishek. Could I get your full name? That would be your first and...
Well, you get the point. So these are a couple of things that you could do with, like this is one way you could get started with building an assistant on Cloud Code or through the manual GUI. And if you want, you could also ask your Cloud Code to set up tool calls for you, upload knowledge base for you, set what's the total number of results that you get. You could also ask it to buy numbers for you and assign it to an assistant so you can get a phone number that you can call, schedule SMS for you. And there's a lot that you could do just using Cloud Code and Telnyx or Cloud Code and STT endpoint, TTS endpoint. And yeah, that brings us to the conclusion of our product build and back to our AMA. Ezra, do you want to get started with the first question that we have for James? And
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm excited to kick off the panel with James and Steven. So I think earlier Abhishek showed the module for importing agents from other platforms onto Telnex. What surprises customers most when they migrate from Twilio or Vapi onto Telnex?
Yeah, sure. Hey, folks, I'm James, VP of Engineering, Telnyx, and pretty involved in the product side for AI. I'll take a stab at that, Ezra. So I think one of the big things moving from either Twilio or Vapi to Telnyx is the level of control we have on the telephony side. Like even compared to Twilio, I feel like people are surprised by what we're able to control. So I think there's lots of players in the voice AI space. And there's like a million toggles, lots of options for things like what my transcription is like, how my language model is going to call tools, what the voice is going to sound like. But once you're actually having real calls on the public telephone network, I feel like the level of control really drops off a cliff with a lot of providers. So there's like just one example. We had a customer move over at the end of last year, not from Vapi, but same type of product as Vapi. And they had one issue that had really been bugging them for like months, which is one of the numbers that their voice agent was supposed to transfer to was just, it just did not work on one of their agents. And they worked with the voice AI provider and never went anywhere. And so when they moved over, they asked us too, like, just can you take a look at it? Because when they moved over, it actually wasn't working on Telnyx either. So we had one of our telephony engineers look into it. And for whatever reason, the upstream carrier that was actually receiving that did not know how to route that number. But so all we did is one of our engineers just routed that number to a different one of the carriers that we partner with, and it worked same day that the request came in. Those types of things you just can't do on a lot of other platforms.
Great answer. Abhishek, do you want to proceed?
I also got something here to
sure,
to
Steven.
touch on too. Yeah, so I'm leading the solutions team. I'm interfacing with a lot of different customers with a lot of different use cases. And yeah, I mean, they're always very pleasantly surprised by how deep our agent orchestrator goes and all the features that we have available. And then just like, touching again on what James was saying, just, the latency and how fast the turn taking is. Like the agents are super snappy. So it's just really the dedication that we've been able to put into this with all of our knowledge in the voice space. And then, one of my things I'm going to probably reiterate in a few of these questions is just going to be like the level of support and white gloving that we give people. We'll pull larger companies into Slack channels. James and his team get pulled in there sometimes too. And really, it's just all about the customer. And it really shows on their faces too when we're on a call with them and they're just so happy.
Awesome. Okay, that brings me to my next question. So what's the hardest infrastructure problem that nobody talks about when they talk about voice AI, or when they see a demo and they're like, okay, this looks easy, let's just build it in-house. So what's the hardest problem nobody's considering, or they're not looking at the problem, they don't see it, they don't foresee it?
Yeah. I think something that we've had to invest a lot of time on in the engineering side, specifically because we've chosen to go the route of we're going to self-host everything, right? We have our telephony stack. We have all of the transcription models, open source language models, text-to-speech models co-located on our infrastructure globally. That sounds nice, right? It's a lot of work to do that, and then it works on the happy path. But then you have to think through if you're going to keep that latency, as we're constantly upgrading all of these different models and services, and we're doing maintenance on all these different sites, or traffic comes in an imbalanced way onto our network from different customers. Are you actually managing to dynamically route traffic in a smooth way, deal with failover? Across all those things that have to be orchestrated sub-second in order to preserve the voice AI experience. That's an incredibly difficult infrastructure problem that we've spent an enormous amount of time on that I think people don't talk about, because if you are outsourcing, right, some of these services like speech to text or language model to another provider, you don't have to think through or care about that. You're just having it go on the public internet, and it'll get solved that way.
Great. So I'll open the floor for the next question. So as users, we can often we experience latency, and we know what that's like and how much of a bad experience that is. But what's actually going on behind the scenes? What physically happens on the internet that degrades a voice agent's call?
Sure. So public internet is, this distributed system of nodes that kind of have like a small part of the larger picture of where things live. So everything is kind of operating on a best effort. I know the next closest node that I can send this information to, and hopefully that'll get closer to its final destination. But it's a massive system that in real time, tons in traffic, global traffic, right? So there ends up being congestion between nodes. The estimates that people use to know like what's closest get out of date or are wrong, things go down. So very simple situations where, oh, I'm in one place and the service I'm trying to reach is actually only like 12 miles down the road. That might not be the path that the traffic actually takes, right? It might go in a very weird loop somewhere far away from both of us and come back. It's unpredictable. And the result of that is like, let's say that's audio data that's going all the way out and coming back. Now you have sound that's coming in out of order, right? Either to a human or to an AI agent, and they can't make sense of it. If it's an AI agent getting bad sound, that problem is going to compound. This is a cascade of, we have a model that hears audio and turns it into text, and then we have a model that takes that text and makes a textual response, right? But if it doesn't get if the speech to text model doesn't get good speech, you can't have good text, then the language model has bad input and the whole system falls apart.
Thanks for the very clear explanation, James. Abhishek?
Yeah. Speaking of scaling, right? Moving from public to a private network, but then now as a business that's using voice AI, of course, like any business, a business grows. And with the growth of business, they increase the number of concurrent calls that goes through. But what happens when, like, what breaks and what changes when a customer or a prospect or a company moves from a 500 concurrent calls to 5,000 concurrent calls? What transition do you see, James and Stephen, both of you, if you may, when this scale happens or when they go big? What do you see happen a lot?
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces there. I just mentioned a few, right? Like there's the speech to text, there's language model, there's text to speech. There's everything you have to consider from a telephony perspective. On the engineering side, the hardest thing to scale, the most resource intensive piece of the whole puzzle is the language model. And for voice AI, right, it's all about your time to first token for a language model, which isn't like a lot of use cases in AI right now are like super throughput heavy, and you don't really care when the first token comes back. You just want to like shove as much text at a language model as you can. That can scale a little bit easier than for voice, where you have to be really, you can't have too much concurrent traffic per node for a language model, because you'll degrade the time to first token that way. So being able to understand where all your models are hosted and have enough capacity to handle that failover. We spent a lot of time, we have multiple sites, right, in the US, for instance, and they'll share traffic. So sometimes, we'll get traffic in Atlanta and the fastest place to go is to the GPUs in Atlanta. But if that's under pretty heavy load, some of that's going to shed to New Jersey, for instance, for language models, and that's been super important to implement. That at least on the engineering side, that's I think the biggest scaling concern. I don't know, Steven, if you want to talk about anything.
Yeah, I can talk more about like more like sort of like telephony and like business side as well, James. So I mean, once you start scaling to that level, one major piece too is to ensure that the use case that you're using AI agents for, especially on the outbound side, is compliant with the regulations in the countries in which you're operating. And those vary, right? So in the United States here, you need to make sure that the folks that you're calling are opted in to receive those calls. If you're operating that scale, you have to scrub against the DNC, like do not call list, also to the reassigned number database. And also, you have now effectively built a dialer. And according to some of the latest FCC statutes, you need to register your company in the robocall mitigation database and provide Telnyx with that FRN number. the carriers have a lot of extremely intelligent observability that they have deployed over the last couple of years. So they're able to detect these dialer type of patterns, and companies that are not falling into, let's just call it what is falling into line with following the regulations, can receive things such as tracebacks, which can result in your company being ejected from platforms. So these are all real things that need to be reviewed, established to ensure that everyone's operating, within the scopes of, FCC requirements. Because again, in technology, we're so often used to the move fast and break things mentality, right? Like we've been all doing this for a long time. But when we start making calls, now we have to curry favor to the FCC and the rules there. So we work a lot with clients to help them understand those things and make sure that they're able to work, because it's not usually a huge issue of us, of like the technology able to take the scale, right? It's to ensure that it's done in a compliant fashion.
Steven, you mentioned some of the education we provide with regard to the regulatory environment. What are other common misconceptions customers who may be just starting their voice AI journey commonly have that we have to, dispel or educate them on?
Oh yeah, let me tell you my favorite one: voicemail drops. Everybody thinks that this is some like little magic thing, or it's just like a config setting that when you place a call, you add, some additional parameter that this is a voicemail drop. And it's nothing of the sort. It's a pattern, right? The way it works is you're essentially placing two calls at the same time. Basically, you place one call, and like a millisecond later, you place a second call to the same phone number. That first call holds up the line, and the second call goes directly to voicemail. And we're in the day and age of AI where pattern matching has never been faster. And all of the carriers, the AT&Ts, the T-Mobiles, the Verizons, they can see those patterns, and they do not like that. So that's like one of the big ones we always have to tell people on. Like, it's not a config setting. It's, taking advantage of an older system, which is how like cell phones work. But it's a pattern that's easily found, and the carriers don't like it.
I have a question. So now there's a lot of noise out there in terms of testing a product. Some people say test out latency, some people say test the cost. Then there's the way you could check out what infra are they on, what model providers do they give. There's so many permutations and combinations in testing a voice AI platform. So according to you, both of you, what exactly is the best way for anybody to test out a platform? Like, is there a way you would recommend our listeners here, or what our webinar attendees here to follow?
Yeah. Yeah, I think people get really focused on like, oh, like which, like I have my favorite language model, I want to use that, or like I have my favorite voice, I want to use that, which, and those are important things. But, and then, they'll hop into the browser and they'll like test, because everybody has a browser like test and it's easy to set up. They'll be in a quiet room like I'm in right now. There's nothing going on. They'll have a little chat. It'll sound nice. Great. What I want people to test, because like the way like I'm testing stuff daily, is see if you can hook it up. Like, see how easy it is, first of all, to actually hook it up and call it from a real phone, right? See what that looks like just from a setup perspective. And then go out of your office, out of your house, onto a busy street and call that same agent. See if it sounds the same, right? Because the audio codec that you get on a browser is going to be super high quality, but are you actually able to get that through the whole telephony stack? Probably not with a lot of people besides Telnyx. And see how it handles noise, bad cell conditions, all of those types of things that are going to be what most people's end users are going to end up experiencing as well, right? And see how it works there.
Great.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm really going to just like double down on what James was saying. You have to test in the manner in which this is going to be used. This is common thing that happens. And sometimes too, we're very quick to help to assess where there's trouble. If you report an issue to us, we're going to jump into it and try to solve it. But we oftentimes do this. We burn time trying to test something, trying to resolve an issue that's occurring in some sort of test environment where your agents will never actually be used, or a pipeline will never actually be used. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense. So always test in the way in which it will be used.
Great. I think I have one more question for you guys, and then we can move on to the Q&A. So yeah, I guess this one's an elevator pitch. If you had 30 seconds to tell someone why they should choose Telnex without using the words latency or infrastructure, what would you both say?
I would be talking about partnership and control. Telnex controls. I'm trying very hard to not say latency or infrastructure. Telnex controls so much of the stack, right? And that gives us so many options for moving the needle for customers based on specific needs. Love working closely with customers on that. And we see the whole picture, right? Because we are accountable. We own end to end, right? Everything, all of the incredibly complicated things you need in order to build voice AI. We own all of it. So it's not like you have to ping pong back and forth between a lot of different people who are very focused on like their particular area and like do not necessarily see the whole picture. That would be what I'd say.
And kind of similar to the partnership aspect, the partnership and the support, that's really where we're gonna shine. We jump in, we try to solve problems with you. We're able to iterate at a rapid rate and can roll out new features. So that's really just massive here. And we've even rolled out an initiative called 15-minute SLA, which is like the most ambitious thing, one of the most ambitious things our CEO has rolled out. But if you hop into our external dev channel and you're asking questions, like we're aiming to get you a meaningful response. And oftentimes like tacking on to the bot response, like even though we're so AI first here, we still fully understand that human element of care, and we're going to jump in and help you every step of the way.
Yeah, great answers, James and Steven. So right now we'll be going through the questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to type them in the chat. But we'll begin with a question from Trip. I am considering building an AI and have a provider offering 2 cents per minute for AI and said Telnex is actually built on this system. That seems too good to be true. Is that actually true?
It probably sounds to me like they need to revisit some basic math. Go for it. You're gonna make a lot more money. I guess they're losing money on that.
I also don't know what they mean when they say that Telnex is built on their system.
All right. This next one is from Aditya. Is it possible to integrate an AI model like Claude or OpenAI with a live transcript stream so that it can process conversations in real time and generate responses automatically?
Yeah. So Telnyx voice AI assistants, we support Anthropic models, we support OpenAI models. You can do that with bringing your own key, and then you're managing your account separately with them. You can also just do it natively. So we have accounts with both of them, so you can just get started without needing an account. And yeah, those are going to be external models. So we are going to be hitting a third party over public internet in order to get the inference for Anthropic and OpenAI. And we also offer a ton of cheaper state-of-the-art open source models that are running on our infrastructure, co-located with everything else, like Kimi K 2.6.
This next one is from Ahmed. Can we use a state-of-the-art inference models like Claude GPT and still keep the under 600 millisecond latency benefits?
No. You can't achieve sub 600 milliseconds with a network call to one of the large models like that. The metrics we're talking about are for the open source stuff that's running on our hardware. And I know a lot of folks are probably a little hesitant about open source, but it is improving so rapidly. I'm starting to get, frankly, a little annoyed by how much I have to keep updating open source models and updating our benchmarks to keep track of how intelligent they're getting.
This one is also from Ahmed. Is Telnyx running inference models themselves or routing to a third-party LLM GPU provider? I guess I'm confused by Telnyx's GPUs. Does that mean only self-hosted models can run on the stack?
Yeah, we support both. But I heavily encourage people to try one of the open source models first, the recommended Kimi K2.5, 2.6, because it's good and it's super fast. You're not going to get anything that fast with OpenAI or Anthropic.
This one's from Mikhail. I hear that Telnex has better latency, and I saw that you have latency optimization based on location, which is great for voice assistants. For example, a customer calling local restaurants in San Diego is going a random location in West Coast back and forth trips. I'm trying to understand how local we can go. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so it does depend a little bit. So from a GPU perspective, we have sites in like in the US, we have sites in US West, US Central, US East. So that's how local it is. So like the max network hop there is going to be, in ideal circumstances, like a couple tens of milliseconds that you're adding for that. If for our like telephony anchor sites, we have even better coverage. So we have, I feel like a few dozen telephony anchor sites. Your media is very close to the end user. And yeah, max, you're talking about like 25, say, milliseconds to get to the GPU.
This is an open-ended question from Michael. Any comments on different audio codec results, HD codecs versus G711?
I love the HD voice codecs that Telnyx offers. I think it's a world of difference. If I talk to an AI assistant in the portal, which is going to use Opus, super clean. I call on a Telnyx HD voice enabled number, basically the same experience. You switch that to some of the legacy codecs that like most other providers are going to have to default to because they are not in the media, they cannot negotiate codecs, right? Because Telnyx can do that because we're a carrier. It just sounds, everybody knows what that sounds like. It's tinny. You talk to your family members or whatever, it doesn't sound exactly like them right on the phone. Same thing with your voice assistant. It's not going to sound the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just left over of a previous age. The reason why those codecs were chosen is because when VoIP was first released, you had to think about the type of connections people had available to them. They had DSL connections that had maybe like 2 megs upload speed, or T1s if you were a business that gave you 1.5 meg up and down. So to be able to transmit voice at 80 kilobits a second per channel, there was no choice but to use lower bandwidth codecs. And nowadays, we all have gigabit level connections at our homes. Like it's time that the carriers get out of the Stone Age and essentially go with the next generation carrier like Telnex that worked to get these HD codecs democratized to folks operating in the AI space, web developers that don't know anything about voice. Like that's why we're such a great partner for you to work with.
Yeah, lots of great questions. Feel free to continue putting questions in the chat. This next one is from Soban. What's the maximum prompt token count we should aim for an agent to keep latency low while maintaining context accuracy?
That's an interesting question. So first of all, like many of the third-party providers, Telnyx for language model, Telnyx will cache your prompting, which helps a lot, right? So just a quick primer for people who maybe don't have this level of detail. If you have a ton of instructions that you've written out for an assistant, it can get quite lengthy to have them follow everything. Every single time you talk, every turn between you and a voice assistant, you have to send all of those instructions, and the GPU has to process all those instructions. You can cache that if you are on the same physical infrastructure, right? If you can actually get the request to go to the exact same GPU that it did last time, it's cached, and you don't have to process it again. And we can do that because we have the language model, and so we'll cache stuff for you. So that'll help a lot. there's no one size, like one fits all answer for this because there's so many things that affect latency for you, right? So you're talking about the language model affecting latency, but you have to think about the transcription and the voice, and just anything else that might be going on at the time. If you're on the order of magnitude of like tens of thousands of tokens, that should not be noticeable at all. If you start getting into the order of magnitude of hundreds of thousands of tokens for a prompt, I think you might start feeling like your agent is slower, no matter what language model you're using.
Next question. What is the best way to, and this is from Artem, what is the best way to audit AI voice calls? Is it recording the calls? Is it having a human agent monitor the AI call? I think this question is really great because I'm really curious because I know we have everything from like transcripts to custom insights to integrations with Coval. So I'd like to hear your guys' take on the best approach to this.
Yeah, you need multiple tools for this because it is a really complicated set of things that are happening. So recordings are really great because you can hear exactly what things sounded like, and that's very informative. It's hard to like fully. I don't think we've gotten to a place where like people will claim that you can like send it to an AI model that'll like analyze the audio quality, but I at least personally tend to still disagree sometimes with automated things in terms of like how something sounds. So just being able to listen to a call is super helpful. But there's things that you want to audit that aren't sounds that are happening. Did my assistant make the right tool calls? Like that's not going to be actually spoken, but did it happen appropriately? The tool responses that came back, did it relay that to the user correctly? Because sometimes what happens is it'll get the right information and then it'll say the wrong thing. So we offer observability integrations like with LangFuse, where you get full tracing into everything the language model is thinking and all the tools that it's calling, which is another important audit step. Ezra's talking about Coval, that's another integration we offer. So that's like while LangFuse is very like inspecting the details of the language model, Coval is black box testing. It'll run scenarios for you. So that'll be testing. It's not your live traffic that you're inspecting with that, but it's you're able to like while you're building, you can test cases. You can say this is an angry customer who wants a refund, and it'll go out and automate that for you. You can see how well your agent does, right, or something like that. Also super useful for inspecting agent behavior.
This one's from Leonardo. Any plan of integrating a live turn check system like the new thing LiveKit showed for guardrails, internal RAG, and so on?
Yeah, this is very interesting idea. So it's something that we are actively exploring internally. I guess I will just express like a slight amount of skepticism because I've read LiveKit's blog post on it, and it sounds very compelling. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do in real time with actually not having a latency hit, and like you have to combine having a model that is intelligent enough to be like smarter than the voice agent that you have in the system, but also able to give feedback to that agent in a way in which it makes sense in a live natural conversation. And the models that they had demoed as being able to do that were a pairing of GPT-4o mini and GPT-4o, which don't actually have much of a latency difference in practice. Because OpenAI optimizes their hardware to have about the same latency for both of those. It's just one of them's a lot cheaper and smaller. It's a new space. I think it's super interesting. Yes, we'll explore, but also I'm skeptical about some other claims.
From Andrew, any context drift risks on hosted inference for larger token count agents?
I think lots of agents will get lost at the edge of their the context length that they were trained at. Yes. So it depends on your use case. I don't think that is specific to the Telnyx hosted inference. I think you can run into that issue with any language model.
This one's from Mateo. Is it possible to shorten the agent reply time, the duration before an agent begins responding to the other party on a call? I would appreciate any information you could provide on whether this can be adjusted.
There's a couple ways to toggle that type of thing. Mostly, I mean, assuming that you've already optimized your model choices around things that'll benefit latency, and you're trying to like further enhance beyond that. There's kind of two, it's mostly comes down to like transcription settings, and there's kind of like two schools of thought or two like modes of doing that with transcription. So like some of the older school stuff was, oh, like what if we let people have basic configuration where we're doing minor checks on like what type of thing was transcribed? Was it like I'm reading out numbers like digits for a phone number or something important and I'm pausing and so I want to wait longer? Or was it something besides that? And so I want to respond really quickly. So it's like kind of like old school tweaks that you can do on like any transcription engine. And then some of the newer stuff is like the smarter sort of combo transcription and turn taking models like DeepGram Flux, which is our recommended default on Telnyx AI assistants, where it's actually like trying to detect the end of it basically predicts a probability that you're done talking based on the actual audio that you have. And so the toggle you have there is very intuitive. It's just lower the threshold for which the model decides you're done talking. So it says, oh, I think there's a 60% chance. I'm going to go ahead anyway. You can do that type of thing, and you just have that trade-off between it'll be quicker most of the time, but also maybe there'll be some more false interruptions as well.
This is another one from Soban. Does Telnex automatically inject tool calls into the prompt, or do we need to include them explicitly in the prompt?
Telnyx is managing the entire chat completions like message history for you. So, and we'll handle the tool calls for you as well. So every turn the language model is going to get the system instructions, everything that has previously been said between the user and the assistant, all of the tool calls the assistant has made, and all of the responses that it's gotten back from the tool calls.
Great. Any other questions? If not, I'll turn the floor over to James and maybe Steven for a final thought before we wrap up, and Abhishek as well. James, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, come build stuff on our platform. I'm in the external Telnyx dev channel, Slack channel. So if you run into issues, hit me up. My Slack handle is James W.
Yeah, same thing. I'm also in the XDev channel, and I also work a lot with our developer relations folks. So feel free to bring in there if you have any ideas, you want to understand how you can improve an agent, just give us a shout. My Slack handle is at Steven M.
Yeah, and for the ones who couldn't attend this webinar, they're listening to this live, we'll be sending out an email after this. If you had any questions for our team, reply back to that email and we can answer them async. And yeah, thanks a ton for joining this webinar, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Ciao.